our challenge was to design a program that helps journalists better understand the concept of diversity. So not just like know what diversity is, but we want to help build an awareness of what exactly it means to be diverse. So we said that we were going to take some research. Wait, let me turn around. So we said that we were going to do some research, take some research from like different professional organizations like the National Association of Black Journalists, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. I'm not exactly sure what the LGBT one is called, but that one too. Like every single one that we could find, we were going to get them to survey their own people and try to give us that information. And based off of that, we were going to do a pre-test first. So that means that we're going to, get the information, find out what they're doing, what people know about diversity, how they feel about diversity. And then we will have people kind of describe their experiences and how it impacts their reporting, and I guess how your reporting represents your community and newsroom. So then it's your turn.
Alrighty. So is this working?
Yes. Okay. Eco?
Okay. Okay, now there we go. So one of the main point for our proposal or project here is mutual mentorship. And so what we want to get from that is collaborative and collective innovation. We really want people to start building a dialogue within the newsroom, not only with their audience, but also within each other, and being able to express different ideas and being able to learn about their coworkers in order to be able to produce stories that will be able to be more effective in their reporting. And so this is a lot here to take in, I get that. And so we have like a roadmap here so you guys can see like our dialogue as we talk about this, but another part that we wanted to include was inclusive, is to no longer have a conversation where it's just black and white dialogue, but to recognize that there's so much diversity within communities, within religion, politics, geography, and we just want to also recognize that socioeconomic levels are also an important point to discuss as well. And there's also like unconscious bias, where we recruit from other areas that are represented within the fault lines, within race, class, gender, geography, and what was the last one? Race, class, gender, geography, and generation. Thank you. Yes, so.
Okay, so I guess we switch mics again. So basically, the ways we said we were going to do that is, one, we're going to be doing a monthly forum. So like have a sit down with the executives, because a lot of change needs to start at the top. So if we can just have a forum where the employees can just speak with the executives and kind of get their opinions to the executive, then I feel like that could really make a change. And we also want to do not just like a partnership between coworkers. So we pair two different coworkers together and just have them talk to each other, have dialogue, and just be open to each other. And we're hoping that if everyone just keeps on talking to each other, then they're able to kind of get what they need. And I guess the way we said we were going to measure this was after maybe like a 6 month to a year, we were going to see the quality of stories from the beginning to the end. Because I don't know if it's just me, but I could tell when a staff is diverse based off of their stories. So we're hoping that if people are more aware of the diversity in this world and are more aware of the diversity within their own communities, they'll be able to write stories that reflect that. So that's kind of the way we're planning on measuring that, getting the qualitative data. And did we miss anything?
Well, is this on either? I'm having a bad luck with mics. For our outcome, basically, like we want to be able to provide measurable results as well as qualitative results to be able to give back to organizations like ASNI so that they're able to see, okay, this is what we're getting from these newsrooms and this is what we can do to ultimately create change within the newsroom. So
that's pretty much it. Mm-hmm. Any questions?
Mm-hmm. I just want to point out real quick, so the color coding.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the first time we met, we used the black. The second time we used the
Green.
orange.
No, yeah.
And then the green. So we were
guess I'll answer. I honestly think we said, I guess, to a year, because the only thing we're hoping this would be kind of as cheap as possible, because not like they're going out and doing like complicated stuff. They're literally just talking to each other and actually having conversations. So the only thing I could really foresee us maybe paying for is really like the survey stuff and all that. And since we want to really be able to get as much information as possible, we're gonna have it done to 6 months to a year, maybe a year most likely, but around that time, just to kind of really get as much information as possible.
So with the year time frame, that's like one course. Would the newsroom continue to like implement those to be like new pairings each year, or how do newsrooms are changing? How do we keep up with?
You want to answer that? Do you want me to answer that?
I could.
Okay.
So I think like one of the important things that we discussed like with our group in terms of like mentorship is providing opportunity for each person in the newsroom to have mentorships with everybody within their, well, not everybody within their newsroom, so that they have the opportunity to seek like different backgrounds within each part, whether it be a generation gap, race, class, whatever, so that they are able to have more of like a developed background as a journalist when going into those stories. Yeah.
So all or nothing, like everybody's got to.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And part of it too is hoping to increase retention of talent. So
Yes.
you're pairing older folks, more seasoned journalists with new media folks, and they're learning from each other, not just in terms of life experience, but also in terms of journalism experience and how to adapt. And
All right. Thank you.
Good job, thank you. So we can now fill seats, and we'll bring up the next group.
That was amazing.
Like heating up my tea. That's my girl.
Y'all did it. You guys are really, really fun.
Thank you.
Y'all were very well spoken.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the microphone that doesn't work. This is the one that does. So.
Probably want to give it.
It's in the presentation.
2018 calendar.
No, I have the calendar in the presentation.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I thought you guys need that. Awesome.
The Bitly's to that, right?
Welcome everyone to team number 2. I want to introduce the team members.
I'll have it
We
on my
have
phone, so
Sarah
you don't have to
Edwards,
put it up on, unless you want to put it up on.
Cindy Noclaris, Contia Prince, and Crystal Lewis Brown, San Antonio. And we were mentored today by Angel Shaw, all the way from Minneapolis. Team number 2.
So the challenge we mainly focused on was to develop an idea or initiative to help newsrooms hire and retain a more diverse staff. So in doing so, we created our DART initiative, which is a way to encourage instinctively diverse and inclusive culture within the newsroom. And when we talk about instinctively, we just mean naturally. So DART also stands for Develop, Attract, and Retain Talent. So the charge within our newsroom, you will create a space that your employees and other workers in the newsroom will discuss, so they're able to attract, retain, and promote growth within the newsroom. And in doing so, you will be more able to represent your underrepresented groups by fostering intentional cultural conversations.
So in order to have DART happening, we do need to have a proactive, organized motion. That means being intentional, but also being turning the environment into something that's instinctive. For this, we need the cooperation of the whole newsroom. And for this, we've come up with a calendar that breaks down into groups, lunches that integrates people at multiple levels of the company. So that means groups of 3, so it's small and kind of judgment-free zones in which conversations are nurtured in a way that we can talk about diversity, but eventually inform everyone about different perspectives and points of view that will inform our news coverage and get to underrepresented communities. And therefore, people will feel more comfortable being in that newsroom and staying there. So for the way it works is we will have a year-long calendar. So this is a long-term thing, so it's more stable and permanent. It starts with lunch that have regular, once a week, lunches of groups of 3, one being a senior, one being a mid-level, and one being a junior staff member. Then an ongoing survey with about 7 to 10 questions that try to address diversity issues within the company, but those are anonymous so that people feel more comfortable to express their needs. And then brown bag lunches in which the groups of the lunch-ons will meet eventually every quarter. The leaders of these lunches will meet and with the memos that come up from these meetings to try to generate progress and have a measure of where they're moving towards. So
the calendar will also consist of some community open houses that are optional. And it'll be aimed at bringing in outside voices from outside of the newsroom so that you can further diversify the conversations going on. And then at the end of the year, there'll be a wrap-up, which is just an opportunity to look at the yearly survey and measure success in cultural initiatives for the upcoming year. So our calendar will be pre-populated and available to download so people can import it directly into their own calendar and not have to worry about creating one of their own. So a couple of examples. So the first lunch will just consist of an icebreaker, which is just a fun activity to get conversation started. We borrowed API's cultural toss as an example of that. And then the second lunch we have is called Sharing is Caring, in which team members or coworkers will share a positive memory from their current workplace regarding diversity, and they'll also discuss a plan on how to include or create more of those positive experiences for other coworkers in the future.
And so in addition to those lunches, that's going to foster that one-on-one and or three-on-one conversation to kind of get those colleagues to learning a little bit more about each other. The pulse survey is something that's done typically in many employment opportunities and have many employee engagement outputs from it. So you're going to not only ask them about topics about diversity, but you're going to want to know how they feel about the atmosphere overall. The topics will include, are you happy at work? Would you have a coworker that you can confide in? Are you comfortable speaking up? If you were offended by a coworker, would you share that with them? And these are all things that we'll be providing in terms of a template. So we might have about 20 questions that you can plug into that pulse survey that'll kind of give you an idea of how your culture is measuring from the beginning of the time you start those first lunch and learns into the end of the year. And as they mentioned already, this is something that'll be ongoing and just become something that's part of your everyday, your yearly calendars. Oh. And here's an example, if you guys can see it. So this is actually going to be available for you to download and plug in. So these are the examples that she's come up with already that just kind of lets you know what the coworkers would be expected to do at the end of this lunch. And these are things that are going to be safe spaces, right? So you're going to want to encourage them to have that open and honest conversation. And even when they do the pulse surveys, those are things that are going to be anonymous. And our form is through a Google form, so that when you get together for those lunches, that newsroom leader can put together some of those things that might have been concerns that have come up throughout the month or throughout the quarter. And then at the end of the year, that's something that you can gauge.
I guess to conclude is the biggest takeaway of this will be that in order to create a true diversity, it takes time, it takes effort, and it takes input of everyone so we can get a full-on understanding of what that culture could mean. because we understand that a lot of these newsrooms already have a culture. So how do we modify this culture into something that's accepting to everyone, but also respectful and can evolve over time?
Thank you. Okay, 2 minutes of questions.
So first of all, great job, you guys. But I have a question about newsrooms who maybe don't have people of color. How do you anticipate those conversations going, and how can this help them?
This one will be a little bit more tricky, but I think in that case, it might be, you just have to find an advocate in that newsroom. Unfortunately, it might be a little bit more difficult to bring in those community voices that you should be looking for anyway. One of the concerns that we had was time and cost, and so we know there are many nonprofits that are able to come in, they can speak in terms of diversity, and that's something that if it was a program that was fully built out, those resources could be provided. So it might be a little more difficult because you don't have that ground roots effort, but those resources are out there. And the one thing that we neglected to mention is that this is not just for physical newsrooms, this is also for digital newsrooms. So maybe I can't meet with Sarah face-to-face for a lunch, but we can have a Google Hangout lunch. And it's important that that's video, that it's Google Hangout or that it's Skype so that we can see each other's facial expressions and we really get to know each other outside of what you can do via email or Slack or even a phone call.
Another thing that we did talk about is how intentional this has to be, and I think we do have to highlight that. The fact that a newsroom is adopting this initiative, it's already it's speaking for what they're looking for and that they see this as a need. So this is also why we included the community meetings, because they will inform what our readers are trying to get from us as we're serving them. And so when it comes to diversity in a specific and how this calendar nurtures that diversity, we do want to, and if we go into the questions specifically, for example, it grows over time of how much we're put, it doesn't just throw you into the question, or are you diverse? But it does, for example, if you go to week number 5, mini content audit, it does go back to, okay, let's take the top 3 stories of this week and examine how we handle gender, how we handle race, and all of these topics. And that will be indicative, okay, do we have a problem when it comes to coverage? What do we need? And so this is the main reason why the memos coming out of these meetings are important, because there are an assessment of what we need to do as a newsroom. So this is why being active about and engaging with this whole process is important, because we need to diagnose how much of a problem we have with diversity. Anybody else? And hopefully having no questions means that we did a good job at explaining what it means.
You did, thank you. All right, next up we have team 3. Let me get you pulled up.
I'm going to just say, hey, yes, team 3 were awesome, and then hand it off. Yeah, and then we can introduce ourselves. I don't want to do that.
That's the code, right?
Oh, yes. That's us. Thank you for the tech support.
Okay, we're team 3, and we kind of did a project that I guess is project 4, which is to help people better understand how to support journalists of color, people from marginalized communities, but really journalists of color. And so I'm gonna hand it over to the thinkers and the makers and the creators here. So they'll tell you more about their project idea.
Hi everyone, my name is Aria Malula and I'm a student at the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. In my program, I will be working with Black and non-Native families who are navigating autism in the Bronx.
Hello everyone, my name is Jasmine Goodwin. I'm also a first semester student at CUNY's Graduate School of Journalism. Yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Darrell Russell. I'm a student, senior at Morgan State University.
Hi everyone, my name is Adam Mahoney. I'm a second year undergrad at Northwestern.
Hi everyone, I'm Yaling. I'm at Emerson College.
So we'd like to start this conversation with some engagement from the audience. Please raise your hand if you've ever heard of the term code switching. I'm not surprised. Who here knows what code switching is? Okay. Would anyone like to give a definition or their interpretation of what it is?
Well, I guess to elaborate on that, it's just like to adjust your persona and also your language to whatever setting you're in because you want to assimilate.
Yeah, assimilation is a good word, and I think it's important to start this conversation by asking these questions because even though we all may, or majority of us may be Black or from similar communities, we do bring a lot of color and nuances to these conversations. And if we can get a little bit more personal before we pitch our idea, has anyone here ever code switched themselves? Okay, okay, that's good.
So, perfect. So we present to you That's the Code, the unique experiences of journalists in the media industry. And essentially this is it'll be a written guide as long as a visual component to explore the nuances that we just explored with the questions that we asked you. We came up with 5 ways in which people code switch. So your voice, your name, your hair, social media, and language. And these were examples that we were able to come up with. So how many of you have changed the tone of your voice? Or used your last name versus your first name? Maybe wigs or weaves versus natural hair? Social media not being our authentic selves because of the way that we want to be perceived by the media outlets we work for or the people we interact with on our social media. And then language, the language that we use in our reporting, such as first-person language when writing about people living with disabilities.
The definition we came up for code switching is a voluntary or involuntary behavior as a survival tactic or a way to achieve success through the industry. We also came with the project will be a written guide and a visual component. The book will consist of sections like political correctness, race/racial slurs, identity language, names, cross-cultural reporting, definition of diversity, and changed language. This book will be intended to journalists of color, newsroom managers and leaders, and non-journalists of color.
Sorry, so this is a little wonkiness with the presentation slide, but to further elaborate what the people that our target audience is, these were what the why would be and why we were targeting them. So for journalists of color, we want the why would be for them to know that they're not alone, which would be recognition. For newsroom managers and leaders, we would want them to become more aware
So we were going to focus on circulating this guidebook in media-centric industries. So newsroom meetings, journalism schools, diversity trainings or conferences, and any nonprofits who value diversity.
And because this would be the first iteration of this toolkit, our main goal right now is just to make people aware.
So our methods for feedback would include asking this question. What changes or adjustments have been made among readers who are journalists and newsroom managers? So after using this guide, we will want to be able to measure change, measure impact, and measure effectiveness. And so we would do that through surveys, a user-friendly website interface, as well as crowdsourcing in terms of gaining. Yeah.
Crowdsourcing personal anecdotes from journalists who feel comfortable, journalists of color who feel comfortable talking about ways in which they code switch.
So basically going beyond the numbers and like the stories of these individuals. The challenges, however, that we faced in terms of creating this toolkit, written guide, and visual component is how do we measure change and should we provide recommended actions? So how much control and power do we give ourselves versus the newsroom leaders, managers, and journalists of color that we are representing in this guide?
So they've opened for questions. Do you want to restate the question?
Yes, so our question to you all is, how do we measure change? Like, what do you all think are ways in which we can measure change in terms of this toolkit, this written guide, and should we provide recommended actions? So, for example, I don't know, having more check-ins with journalists of color in your newsroom. That's just one example in terms of recommended actions that people should take based off knowing that journalists have experiences with having to do more work when they code switch.
This is basically for the second question. Should we provide recommended action? And I believe that you definitely should, because what is the point of saying that you feel some type of way if you don't have a solution for it? Like if I say you hurt my feelings, but then what are you going to do about it? So we really haven't come to a resolution. So at that point, I just feel like we're just talking to talk. So I feel like if we tell them what they could do to change it, they'll probably be more receptive to that, because they probably have no idea how to change that themselves. So I feel like that would be a pretty good idea to do. Thank you.
I guess some people question the whole need for a code switch, because it's almost like someone said we're losing our identity, we're losing our who we are, and why it's almost unsavory that we're mimicking something that we're really not or whatever, and will a real person stand up? So could you respond to someone say, why are you going there in the first place?
Yes, so basically this whole origination of this idea came from the fact that we realized that this is sort of an internal conversation that we're having amongst journalists of color, and we want there to be an awareness of this to then be able to lead to like more effective ways of understanding our experience as journalists of color to better the diversity problem. We're not necessarily saying that code switching is negative or positive, because we understand that that's selective to whoever the journalist of color is, but we just want to make it known because this is a conversation that has been more unspoken or shared within just a certain community and demographic. Does that answer your question?
I think one of the challenges you guys might face in terms of pitching this to newsrooms or to journalism schools is that some people, I've noticed, advise code switching I've heard it code, C-O-A-T switching, because they tell you that that's something that you're gonna have to do anyway, whether you're black, white, or whichever race you are, because once you take on a certain job and you're representing an organization, you're gonna have to adjust what you put on social media regardless of who you are. You're gonna have to adjust the way that you talk to people, the way that you speak to your coworkers or your colleagues, regardless of who you are. So I would try to put in some measures to make sure that people don't just dismiss this as a conversation that doesn't need to be had because they feel like it's a necessary part of being a working professional, and making sure that you make it known that this is something that people feel is an affront to their culture or their cultural identity, and not being able to express that in a specific workplace, if that makes any sense.
I think one of the points, it's a really good question that we kind of talked about, though not in that way, in the group, is that we want to make it clear to people who may not be familiar the degree to which code switching is expected as part of the code of professionalism for journalists of color to do work in the business. And so hopefully that will help them actually re-examine some of those notions about the way we have to work.
And I just had a comment. When thinking about code switching, we mentioned the word assimilation earlier. Assimilation to what? And to what culture, or to like what expectations? And typically it's to like a white dominant male patriarchal like culture. And I feel like then are we asking the newsrooms to like evaluate how innate that is, and reflecting upon that, why journalists might feel that they need to adapt themselves to that standard?
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, and something we also discussed. And an example we gave is like how much more hours journalists of color are putting in when they have to code switch. For example, if you're covering a community, I'm covering a Jewish community, how much more time it may take for me to work on that story because I need to understand the terms, the language, like the context of the culture. But yeah, we will proceed to the next slide. With what we perceive the long-term benefits and goals to be, and that's people thinking about the news in a diverse angle and perspective, avoiding negative code switching during the journalists of color working in the newsroom or reporting. Each community will be able to understand each other better. And overall, increasing the missing voices from marginalized groups. And then now we just have questions for you all that we'd like to ask. Oh, okay.
Thank you. All right, we'll have group 4 come up.
I think that's, I don't know, I'm not sure whose laptop that is.
It's a presentation.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, that was it. The one that you had.
Oh, that was it?
Yeah.
All right.
Team number 4. It's the same template, but.
Oh.
Wait. Big idea? There it is. Yeah, that's it.
Gotcha. My bad, y'all.
Okay, so yes, we're group 4, and we tackled the challenge number 3, which was the diversity handbook. Oh, and 5, yeah. So we were ambitious. So we kind of combined 2 challenges because we felt that the importance of this discussion required a little bit more than just one idea or innovative solution. So we came up with the diversity reference tool. So this is built off of the idea similar to the AP style book. We described it as a way to create a diversity reference to better support staff and marginalized communities, because we feel it's important that, yes, we address the discussion of newsroom diversity, but also to include those voices within those communities. So it's not one-sided. I believe the name we came up with was the AD style book, which is Amplify Diversity. You know, keep it cute and familiar. So yes, we wanted to understand specifically the language that we speak to each other, as well as the language of the conversation itself. So it's how do we find the issues within diversity relevant to ourselves personally, as well as externally within those communities. So unless anybody wants to add on. Okay, great. So, so we described it as a website or an application, depending on how it's introduced, as a tutorial or introduction video. So this allows the newsroom staff to get a proper introduction to the tool itself. So that would provide examples as far as issues that a reporter might encounter individually. And then on a broader scale, how you can then identify those based on a baseline quiz. So as you're introduced to the tool, you answer questions, generally scenario-based. So as you're answering them and understanding other perspectives, you're able to identify with those biases or perspectives that you're not familiar with. And then this allows you to then receive reference recommendations. So that could be different examples from articles, from other journalists. It could be reference links and things of that nature. And I will pass it off because I'm running out of time. Does anybody want to continue?
Yeah, go for it. Hey, I'm Benjamin. So we were thinking about alphabetizing our reference book, and that would be containing like definitions and examples for such cases. We want it to be able to be searchable through that also, and also apply like just like more descriptions, FAQs. I can't remember like what we were saying specifically, and then possibly like deep links and showing like how these are shown in different journalist associations and their own style books, and like highlighting key information. We also wanted to include timelines, correct? Yeah, we were wanting to include timelines and other things like that, like what might actually be missing from other timelines, and migrate, putting them together. As far as that. Okay.
And once we complete the quizzes and the videos, we had asked a few questions. And the first question is, who isn't here? In regards to fulfilling the notion of diversity. Then we asked, why not? As an entity, are you not looking to diversify your employees or your peers? You know, a lot of times that people hire who they're familiar with out of being comfortable. Disclosing the local statistics of the demographics in your newsroom or work environment is also vital. We had to break that down and figure out, you know, why statistically. And why is it that you have a particular amount of certain individuals in your business or in your newsroom? When we conclude with how we are to engage with each other through sharing credit and collaborating through newsroom and community submissions.
So after asking the question of who isn't here within the newsroom itself, literally getting the newsroom together and say who's not present. Once you have, and then looking at statistics of why, is it statistics of your community? Is it because you have a certain population that's not accessible within your local area? Then we suggested a freelancer database. So these freelancers contribute the articles is who we're referencing in this reference. So a good example is we're talking about gender. And we say cisgender. What does cisgender mean? Under those definitions, there would be articles of people talking about cisgender. And then those articles are written maybe by queer people. So if you're looking for a person and you want that voice is not present in your room, you can reach out to that freelancer and ask them to contribute. So it allows people to take a definition of something they don't understand, learn about it, and then connect directly to that writer or someone who can speak to that point.
Just to add hi everyone, I'm Grace, by the way. This would, from a PR perspective, this also would be a good resource to encourage collaboration with other publications like The Tempest, which is a woman of color owned media organization, kind of like BuzzFeed. And I think encouraging collaboration is really important, and that would be another thing to add to the freelancer database. So I think that would be a good opportunity for this idea.
Okay, we then decided to focus on a monthly lunch and learn, where we promote social interaction between peers and potential employers, and also to create a social interaction that's more laid back. We or the company will provide or encourage individuals to discuss diversity issues, wants and needs, and in order to foster their efforts to create a diverse newsroom and workplace. In an attempt to facilitate a more diplomatic mindset about this topic, we came up with the idea to collectively compile questions in order to get the ball rolling on our internal thought process about diversity. Upon compiling these questions, we conclude that in order to get the politically correct responses to your questions, we ask that the individuals submit to the reference guide that is provided regarding the matter in which they had a question about.
And then lastly, with this reference being kind of a wide tool, and then there's like regional meetings and, you know, they're talking amongst the newsroom, getting together as en masse and talking about, is this tool useful? What are we doing to contribute? How should it evolve? It really helps to kind of get a lot of people in the same room to talk about, is this something that we even need? And then how can we improve it? So that's our thing.
Questions?
I know a lot of times news organizations use freelance writers to go into the different diverse communities, but a lot of times freelance writers, myself, you wonder why don't you get hired and get the benefits packages, and are we as a community giving the major news organizations an out when we take the byline but not the contract in the name of diversity? You guys have any opinion about that?
So yeah, I agree that when it does come to a freelance database, it's not necessarily giving them the full benefits that would normally come with being staff. So I think in this instance, that would be something that the newsroom would have to then invest in. That could be an additional component to the guide itself. So if you are looking to build on your freelance database, perhaps there are some standards of expectations that come with utilizing that database, so you can then have those additional voices within your publication.
I also have a suggestion. Sometimes there's an excuse of, I don't know where to find people. And if these organizations are looking to hire, they could use the database to see, oh, this is a journalist of color. This is someone that has written about this before. This is something we're really struggling with, and then hire them as well. So there's no excuses for I can't find people.
Any other questions, comments?
That's why we thought about the freelance database, particularly like when you're taking this intro quiz, kind of evaluating where your biases or maybe like not lack of knowledge on a particular subject or cultural group, then you're automatically directed to references that would inform those things. And those references come from articles written by the people that are missing in your room. So it's kind of like, here's the definition, here's an article, an example, and then here's that writer that you could potentially hire because there's no really, they want to be employed.
Thank you. All right, team 5. Yeah. So they followed the share out style. This is a share out.
Yeah, we're going back to lo-fi. That's right.
Yeah, let me give you a microphone. Here's a microphone.
We're Team 5. I'm Giovanna Plummer. I'm a grad student at Medill.
I'm Michael. I'm an undergraduate from USC.
I'm Izzy Carter. I am a graduate student at Emerson College.
I'm Colleen Good. I'm with WVU in 100 Days.
So we tackled issue 4. It was how do we help journalists better represent communities that they may not belong to? And our solution that came around 1 p.m. is that we should create a little newsroom, which is a strategic partnership between local schools, professional newsroom organizations, and community organizations. And I'll read out the questions that we came up with if people in the back can't see the questions. So our first question is, how do we develop effective collaborations between newsrooms and schools? Second, how do we create a metric of accountability between each of these organizations? Third, what would this format look like? Fourth, who are the community partners? Who do we see as a leader within the community? How do we define who is a leader? And fifth, how do we justify this and fund this to the higher ups within the news organization? And if you would like to tackle.
Well, I can do the first two. So the way that we thought we can develop this collaboration with the community is that we make it a mutual benefit. So they have the opportunity to participate in the news, and we have the opportunity to increase voices in our newsroom. And then we want to make it a mentorship program. So since it's going to be in schools, we can work with students and give those students a chance to actually participate in news. And like, if they're interested in that as a career field, that could be some good experience. And then we also want to have long-term engagement and readership. So for the people participating, they're engaged in the news. And then for us, that will help us increase our readership. And then some ways that we can create accountability. So some things we came up with were a diversity handbook, which is similar to some of the other presentations. And then editor involvement. So basically the editor will be trained to go out and find these people to be these voices for their community. And that kind of feeds into how do you define a leader. So by letting the community define their own leader or leaders, it gives them a chance to designate who's going to speak for them. And then we also talked about a community agreement, and basically the community and the newsroom will both sign off on it, and we would come up with some terms of what we're going to do, how we're going to cover that community. And then this would be like in a classroom, like it would be in a classroom or at a community center, or it could be in the form of a pop-up newsroom. And the ideas we came up with for that were like Generation Justice, City Bureau, and then these other organizations.
Yeah, so I guess I'll talk about some of the examples. Generation Justice, for those who are not aware, is a nonprofit in New Mexico that engages youth in the community to do their own reporting, and then they share it out on a local radio channel, I believe. So it's a great way for the youth to become involved. Many of them are from underrepresented communities, and so they start to like report on their own community and feel empowered to do news. City Bureau is a Chicago publication, I believe.
It's like a news organization, and they have a public newsroom every Thursday where people can come and like contribute to the news.
Yeah, so they basically like present what's going on in the news and have people comment on if that's good and what's working and what's not. Futuro Media has a podcasting lab in Boston where they're trying to engage first-time media makers to become part of newsmaking. And through that, they're sharing resources, they're doing trainings, they're distributing the stories that are coming out of that lab on their channels. And then this is the last one is High School Journalism Institute, which is a project from the University of Illinois, I believe, Indiana. That's very similar to sort of what we're talking about right now, where they give young people a chance to enter the industry, gain skills, and give the newsrooms new perspectives and a chance to like build relationships long term with a community that has previously not been engaged.
And that was really our focus, was on kind of choosing the places where we would have these little newsrooms based on areas where we had lack of coverage or lack of representation within the newsroom to really diversify coverage by going directly to those communities and involving them. So with that, who are the community partners? We wanted it to be very contextual based on what the needs were of the individual place or the individual community, at least 5 directly impacted, and to make sure that before we started any kind of pop-up program or any kind of program that was asking others to kind of give their time, give their energy, that we really worked to develop trust with any of these groups before starting the program itself.
So our final consideration is how do we justify this and how do we fund this to the higher ups? So we thought of giving these little newsrooms dedicated websites where we publish stories from these little newsrooms. And we will publish some of these stories to the news website themselves, which will generate the same ad revenue, same clicks, same value to the news leaders themselves. And we also, from one of these conversations earlier, thought of some crowdfunding techniques where we can raise money in order to support future journalists. And we would support journalists with technology, money, and our skills and experience as best as we can.
And that is our presentation.
As you publish your articles for the quote news leaders, will you try to reach some type of partnership ahead of time, or not just, hey, this is in your inbox or surprise? I mean, will you try to forge a longer or lasting or a stronger relationship with it?
So this is under like, I think it's this one. Yeah, under how to create a metric of accountability. So when we said that we would train editors, basically the editor would be partnered with a community leader and they will work closely together to form, like, to create these stories. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, we also were talking about like a community agreement that would happen before implementing a little newsroom. So that would mean like reaching out to leaders that we can identify in the community and having them help us create a metric of accountability that we would then be able to like measure our work against. And then we were hoping that as students go out and are doing their own reporting, they will identify new leaders in the community that we probably wouldn't have otherwise been able to identify. I don't know if this is working. And then that would let us continue to build those relationships and improve those metrics. Other questions?
I'm wondering, because at the end you said that all of these stories will go to a particular website. I'm wondering why like a separate website instead of maybe the partnering newsrooms publishing to have like a broader reach. Is there a specific reasoning behind that?
I mean, we discussed this at the end. We would publish most of the stories to the local news outlet, but we would provide the additional website just to provide the contributors with a source to post weekly and more stories, where we publish the longer form stories with extra resources and everything else on the newspaper's website. So this would just be an additional source. It wouldn't diminish their stories and push them away. I understand.
And I think another thing that we kind of discussed briefly is that it's kind of their own space for them to create. But we also did talk about them partnering with the staff on the newsroom who are running these little newsrooms. But I think our general idea was just to give them that space to be able to create.
Okay, team 6. I think I might have to grab the tech person. Oh, we're back. Awesome. I think it's charging when it's on the mic here, so. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-oh. My bad. Built in. Present.
Well, it should be like automatically syncing.
Yeah. Okay.
Should we just move the stand over to the center?
You guys may like maybe line up or something. I don't know. Okay, hi everyone. We're group 6. We focus on the question number 2, which is how on initiatives that can help newsrooms hire more diverse staff. And we came up with the Bond Project, which is a mutual mentoring program for emerging news leaders and their executives. So what are the mission and objectives? We thought of Bond Project as an external organization that helps to create and facilitate two-way partnership / mentorship program within different newsrooms. Our goals would be to help with changing organizational and corporate culture so that the leadership of that said newsroom can reflect the community they serve better. We're also wanted to focus on hiring, but more importantly, retaining the new and diverse talent, which we thought of as one of the key problems. And last but not least, we wanted to make sure that we minimize the so-called blind spots that are a result of a homogeneous newsroom. And so a little more about those blind spots. Many newsrooms suffer from those in their coverage, and it typically is because of the disparities between the high-level and entry mid-career level staff, disparities that are reflected through some of the fault lines that we discussed earlier today, such as gender, age, ethnicity. That in turn makes it difficult to hire new talent, and if that new diverse talent is already there, it makes it much harder to retain. And outside of the obvious advantages of having a diverse talent, retaining that talent means less costs in the future because you don't have to hire new people, you don't have to train them, you got your staff already. And last but not least, coverage that comes out of such less diverse newsroom is not responding to the audience's news, and as a result, can impact the profitability of said newsroom.
Okay, so our program aims at solving these problems and achieve these goals. The first one is to encourage conversation, which we hope to lead to organizational change and create access between professionals of different backgrounds. And the second one is that we aim at fostering a more open and inclusive environment, expand hiring pools, and include people from a variety of backgrounds. And the third one is that we hope that a newsroom that is more representative to the community they serve is established and has a positive impact on revenue, because your story reflects the interest and the community of the people they are in, so they will be more interested in your story, and there will be more clicks, so there will be positive impact on the revenue. Yeah, so this is our business model. First, we'll partner with nonprofit diversity interest foundations, which will listed at the next slide, for seed funding and resources. And the second one is to get commitment from news organizations to run the program. And in the long run, we hope that Bond will be funded by news organizations themselves directly, and we will, our financial model will be consulting fees. So this is our sign-up process. We solicit participation from news leaders based on inputs from these organizations, for example, APME, ASNE, and PBS. And in our application, we require candidates to provide their demographic background, goals, challenge faced by the news organizations.
Yes, the next stage is to how we want to merge our mentors together. And the process is to merge mentors within the same organization across gender, education, and regional backgrounds, and also mediums of specialization. So the mentors within this whole process will include those who are traditional media like print, broadcast, that you will also match with more younger generations of people who are more into digital age, who are more savvy. So, and also, all that's also mostly coming from private universities, also match them with state, those coming from state and city universities also. So it's the other process is the whole also includes matching former newsroom editors with who have experiences like 15 years above, and those from coming from the entry level to 3 years also.
Am I next? Yes, right? Okay. So just to kind of quickly recap, this is a mentor matching program that focuses not only on training people of color to match with other people of color, but having a diverse set of mentors and mentees. In this scenario, everybody is a mentor because they're all learning from each other. And so us, as the Bond Project coordinators, we try to stay hands-off because this is a very one-on-one personal experience between the senior level and junior level mentors. So what we do is just coordinate the process where we're matching the pairs based on their demographics and their interests and their goals. And then we are administering the commitment contracts just to make sure that everybody understands what's expected of them. And we want the mentors to choose what they want to focus on. So we can give some suggestions and activities, but we really want the mentors to form their own goals so that they can be sure to be accountable to themselves. And of course, we could mediate any conflicts and make sure every quarter that people are still staying on track. So it's, we could imagine a one-year curriculum split into 4 quarters that are easy to track. The first quarter would be to gain familiarity with each other and set your own individual roadmaps. And then in the second and third quarter, get really into the personal goals of each side. So if we have mentors in the same organization, they obviously would have different insights on the lower level and the higher level parts of the organization. So I would imagine that the senior level mentor would be very curious about how the junior level mentor views what the power politics of the organization and vice versa. And in that conversation, they can also think about how to improve company culture and company politics. And then in the fourth quarter, they could discuss how the newsroom can adapt to the industry's future, and hopefully in that process, the lower level mentor who has more digital experience or is more digitally native would be able to advise on how the newsroom could go forward in this dynamic industry.
So like Elaine was saying, this would be a 1-year commitment, and we would be basically matching, as a pilot program, we would match 10 pairs. So we would have 10 younger journalists matched with 10 higher level people in the journalism field, and they would also be able to apply through our sign-up form. And like she said, we would just touch base on a quarterly basis, at least at a quarterly basis and as needed. And for our long-term goals, we hope that the news organizations would be more reflective of the communities they represent, and just hope that this is something that can be expanded into multiple newsrooms, and that these news organizations would have more audience engagement, more of a digital presence, and improvement in their coverage overall. Thank you.
Any questions?
It's pretty straightforward.
You did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just want to close out with some quick thoughts. But first, let me just congratulate every group for the effort today and yesterday. You really do deserve a pat on the back and a round of applause. Pat on the back. So thank you. I think really amazing ideas came out of this exercise. I think we're able to see what diversity in the room, working together, looking to understand each other can do. It's incredibly powerful. This is capital in these ideas that can be taken places and expanded upon or actually turn into a thing. So I really want you to recognize the value in what happened today and then to figure out how you can recreate that wherever you go, okay? At this time, I'd love to invite Dana up for a few closing thoughts as well.
Thank you. And some shared Google Docs so that we can co-publish, all of us collaborated together, a report back to the industry, because I think there's so much that's actionable in here. And I just know, working in a newsroom, how much even the simplest template that gives us a tool to start working or start having a conversation is invaluable. I also want to reinforce what he said about there is capital in and value in the ideas that you created. So I want to make sure that even as we share out and co-publish with you what you did, that you're preserving your ability to build that out into something that you can both serve the industry but also potentially monetize. And now I want to, our dean of the WVU College of Media has been around for the past couple of days and has been really quiet, but she's got a few things to say.
Well, thank you very much. And I also want to say that I know that I'm competing with a concert upstairs and also time, because many of you are on your way out, so I will be brief, but as the dean, I always like to have the last word. So first of all, what an amazing 24 hours. And I just want to take a moment, and I want all of you to acknowledge what an amazing experience this has been, and the amazing work that you have done. And I really want everybody to give everybody a hand one more time, because it's been fantastic. And really from last night's pretty amazing Appalachian dinner, I had a stomach ache afterwards, I don't know about all of you, to today's, I'd say, inspired and inspiring presentations. It has just been really a magical 24 hours. I want to thank all of you for coming here from all over the country to engage in such an important, timely, and intentional conversation. It's been almost 6 years since we held our first hackathon. Our multi-year series, Hacking the Gender Gap, was designed to create uses and solutions for emerging digital technology and to inspire young women to seek careers and leadership opportunities in technology fields. It was also designed to bring rural voices to the technology table and to remind the world that innovation isn't just happening on the two coasts, that it is in fact alive and well in the places in between, like Appalachia. But this year, we knew we had to do something different. With everything happening in our world and even in our own backyard, and we, I know that Pittsburgh, the mass shooting at the synagogue has been on everybody's mind this weekend. With all of that happening, we've had to really pivot to a back-to-basic approach. We've seen a nation divided become even more divided. We've seen trust in the media reach an all-time low. And it's a sentiment that has been simmering for a long time before it was stoked by the current rhetoric. And we heard about the API report today that showed that distrust of media is common in communities of color. So the past 2 years have been humbling for journalism. threats to a free press and threats to journalists themselves have sharpened our focus, and they've helped us look inward as we rethink what journalism means and how it can better serve our communities and our democracy. Now, while technology still poses many challenges, don't get me wrong, from inequities perpetuated in AI to disinformation across our social platforms, the biggest challenge facing journalism today is how to reestablish trust with our audiences and to demonstrate our relevance. And that has to begin by journalists doing a much better job of listening to and giving a platform to diverse voices, to better represent and reflect the mosaic that is our shared America. But I'll tell you something, being here today has inspired me. I mean, seeing the amazing work done by our student teams has just given me tremendous hope for the future. You all bring so much to the table. Your creativity, your clear-eyed optimism, and your ability to see beyond what is to what could be. You are the future of journalism, and you are the future of our democracy. And really, based on the way that y'all showed up this weekend, I think we're in pretty good shape. So thank you. And I want to thank everyone for coming this weekend, our students, speakers, and our professional mentors. I want to thank our fantastic College of Media team, Dana Kester, Gina Dahlia, Shannon Cunningham, David Crawford, David Smith, and Tyler Channel. Will you all stand up and let us give you a hand? Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Michael Grant, for your excellent moderation and for being our MC for this weekend. A thank you to Cole Goins, who has been working behind the scenes to design this fantastic program. And then, of course, I have to thank our sponsors, the Democracy Fund, the Scripps Howard Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and also our collaborators, the American Press Institute and Morgan State University School of Global Journalism. We love you guys, and we love our partnership, and we can't wait to do our next work together. And that concludes our Missing Voices Hackathon. Because we like to feed our friends, we actually have food out in the foyer, which you can eat here or take with you on the road. Please take some pepperoni rolls. Please take some snacks. Take it all. And we wish you safe travels, and I wish you continued joy and success on your journey. And please come back anytime. West Virginia University can be your home away from home. We loved having you. Thank you again for coming.